So, welcome everybody. My name is Paul Sullivan. I am an organizer with the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. Today, we are doing a presentation to the Roseville School District about your rights with ICE, or immigration enforcement. I know this is a moment that is very scary for many of you and many of your families. Hopefully, with this information, you can keep yourselves and your families safe and be prepared if anything is to happen. So, before I start, hopefully everybody can see there are instructions on the left-hand side of the screen how to select the audio in Spanish or in Somali, if you need that. Okay,
Well,
so,
um,
yeah,
can I just let them know in Spanish? Si están
yes,
aquí para la presentación en español y miran a la pantalla en la parte superior izquierda, verán las instrucciones, como ven esa flechita, para que se puedan unir al canal donde escucharán la interpretación de la presentación en español. Muchas gracias.
okay, so this presentation will be in 6 different parts. The first part is talking about your rights in general. The second part is talking a little bit about what are warrants, because this is very important for ICE activity. Number 3 is going to talk about common places that you encounter ICE, that you run into ICE. Number 4 is how to be prepared if you are going to encounter ICE. Number 5 is ways that you can protect yourself and your community, especially if you are a US citizen. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about a way that you can practice this in your home with your family so that you are even more prepared if ICE comes to your house or encounters you. So, when we are teaching about our rights, we use this little trick to remember it. We always say 4 plus 1. That means there's 4 very important basic rights, and then one extra one that's especially important with ICE. So these are the 4 basic rights, and I have them in both English and Spanish. Number 1, am I free to go? Number 2, I want to remain silent. Number 3, I don't consent to a search. And number 4, I want to speak to an attorney. If you don't remember anything else from today, remember these 4 rights, because even if you're talking with the police, even if you're talking with ICE, these are always things that are safe to say. And it's actually very useful to say them out loud, because with the US legal system, you have to say your rights out loud to have it recognized by the court. Now, the plus 1 that I talked about, remember there was the 4 basic ones and the one that's especially important for ICE. The plus 1 is I don't consent to your entry. I don't consent to your entry. Now we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about these rights. The first right, you have the right to remain silent. You always have this right. Nobody ever can make you talk about something. And very important, you do not have to ever discuss your citizenship or immigration status with anybody. You don't have to talk to the police about it. You don't have to talk to immigration about it. You don't have to talk to anybody about it. And it's important, if you don't want to talk about it, you need to say so out loud. And if you can, say it in English. So it can be good to practice the phrase, I want to remain silent. I want to remain silent. Now, to ask for your immigration documents, ICE is supposed to not ask unless they have a reasonable suspicion of a crime or some sort of violation of immigration law. Now, of course, we have seen that sometimes they stop people for very little reason, but If you answer any questions, that gives them even more reason to maybe stop you. So if you encounter ICE, always, always, always say, I want to remain silent. Now, you do not have to answer any questions by law enforcement without an attorney present. If you are stopped by ICE or the police, it is important, again, that you say out loud, I want to speak to an attorney. I want to speak to an attorney. This is because you have the right to an attorney and you do not have to answer any questions without an attorney in the room with you. Now, it is very important that you do not lie about your citizenship status or provide fake documents to law enforcement. If you lie about your citizenship status or provide fake documents, that can get you in more trouble. And that can make it even more likely that you might be deported. So it's very important. You don't have to answer the questions, but do not say anything that is a lie. Also, never, 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 never sign anything unless you have talked with an attorney. It's very common for ICE to arrest somebody and then they say, hey, sign this and we'll let you go for now. Usually, what that is that they get you to sign makes it so it is easier for you to be deported. So, never sign anything until you have an attorney with you. There are a few important exceptions to these rules that I want to talk about. The first is that you always have a right to an attorney if you are arrested by the police or by ICE, but because immigration is not a criminal matter, it's a civil matter, the government doesn't have to give you an attorney. You have the right to have an attorney, but the government does not have to give you an attorney. So it's important that you try to find a way to contact an attorney before you run into ICE. In Minnesota, you do not have to provide your name to law enforcement unless they suspect that you've committed some kind of crime. So, for example, if I walked up to you and I am a police officer and I say, what's your name? Show me your identification. You do not have to show that identification unless they say, I think that you committed this crime. But in some other states, especially near us, North Dakota or Wisconsin, those are states where you do have to answer law enforcement if they just stop you and ask for to see your identification. So be careful when you are traveling and know that the rules can be a little different in every state. If an immigration agent asks to search you, you always have the right to say no. However, if they think that you maybe have a weapon on you, they can pat you down to see if you have a weapon on you, even if you do not consent to a search. But it's still important that you tell them that you don't consent to a search. Um, and Luli, I see there's a few things in the chat. I can't open it right now because I think that would show it to everybody. So if there's anything really big, could you come off mute and say something?
Yeah, if you could go just a little slower so the
Slower.
interpreters
Okay,
have a little time. Thank you.
sounds good. Okay. Now, this is section 2. We're going to talk a little bit about warrants. There are two kinds of warrants that are common in the United States. The first is a judicial warrant. Judicial means that it's signed by a judge. It's very important to know the difference between this and an administrative warrant. An administrative warrant is not signed by a judge. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time, when ICE comes to your house, comes to your job, and they say they have a warrant, it is usually not a judicial warrant. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's what's called an administrative warrant. An administrative warrant does not allow officers to enter a home or a workplace without your consent. A judicial warrant does make it so that you have to let them in. and it will be very specific about what it wants from you. A judicial warrant will always have what they're looking for, who they're looking for, a time and a date that is specific to when they are going to look for it. An administrative warrant does not have these things. And again, an administrative warrant is not signed by a judge. So if you are confused ever about it, always look and see, can I find the word judge? And can I find a signature for a judge on the warrant? Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to wait for the interpretation. Hold on. Okay. These are two examples of ICE warrants. Again, it's important to note at the top, it says US Department of Homeland Security. It does not say the word court. It does not say district court. That means that it is not a judicial warrant. It's not signed by a judge. And that means you don't have to listen to this. Also, down at the bottom, you can see that it says signature of immigration officer. It does not say signature of judge. So these are clues to look for if an officer gives you a piece of paper and says that it is a warrant. Okay. This is a judicial warrant. So this says at the top, United States District Court. So yes, it is issued by a court. And it's a little hard to see, but down at the bottom, it says judge's signature. So what this means is that if somebody came to your door and had a judicial warrant that is signed by a judge, that you would have to follow what it says and let them in. But if it's not signed by a judge specifically, you do not have to follow it and you do not have to let them in. Okay, now we're going to talk about some common situations where you may come into contact with ICE. Um, oh, did we lose our Somali interpreter? Oh, there he is. Yes, so common situations. One is that if ICE comes to your home, first thing you always do is you always ask, are you with ICE? Are you with CBP? Ask them, why are you here? One thing that you can do is you can have them show their badge up to the window or through a peephole. However, do not open the door, okay? It's very important that you do not open the door because if you open the door just a little bit, the ICE officer will think, that counts as them letting me into the house. And then they will come into the house. So no matter what, don't open the door even a little. You always ask instead, if they have a warrant, that they either hold it up to the window so that you can read it, or you can ask them to put it under the door so that you can read it. But no matter what, do not open the door so that you can read it. And very important, if ICE comes to your door, you are going to use one of those phrases from the start, the 4+1 phrases, and you're going to say, I do not consent to your entry. That's the +1. That's the really important extra phrase. I do not consent to your entry. Okay. Now, if they have a warrant, and again, even if it is signed by a judge, if you check the warrant and it says judge's signature, you still should check and make sure all the details are correct. Because if any of the details are wrong, for example, if they spell a name wrong, if they have the wrong date, if they have the wrong time, if they have the wrong address, then the warrant is no good and you don't have to listen to it. So it's important to very carefully check the warrant and see, is everything correct on it? Now, If it is signed by a judge and if everything is correct on it, then you do have to listen to the warrant. If that happens, it's a good idea instead of having ICE come into your house to have the person that is on the warrant go out of your house. I know this is very scary. The reason that we say this is because if ICE comes into your house, you probably have maybe children in the house, or maybe you have elders. Maybe you have people who don't speak very much English in the house. And if ICE gets into the house, they will cause all sorts of confusion and fear and chaos. And it will make it so maybe more people get arrested by ICE. So, if everything is right, if it's signed by a judge and all the details are correct on the warrant, it's better to send the person out. But again, remember, if it doesn't have all those pieces, you don't have to listen to it. And if it doesn't have those pieces, if they give you an ICE warrant instead of a judicial warrant or something else, you can just keep the door closed and tell them through the door, I do not consent to your entry. I do not consent to your entry. Okay. Now, even if you do everything right, sometimes ICE will force its way into your house. If that happens, what you need to do is stay calm. Do not resist. Do not run. Be as calm as you can. Do not fight them. And this is where it's very important to say those 4+1 rights out loud. Number one, I do not consent to your entry. Number two, I do not consent to your search. Number three, I want to remain silent. Number four, I want to speak with an attorney. If ICE gets into your house, these are the only things you should say. Do not say anything else to them. Keep saying your rights out loud. Lastly, make sure if there are children in your house or if there are elders in your house, make sure that they know that they should not open the door for ICE. Very important because often if ICE comes and knocks on the door, maybe a small child, a grandparent will just open it because they don't know who it is. Very important. Talk with your family. Make sure that they know they should not open the door if it might be ICE. The next situation that is very common is if ICE pulls you over while you are driving. The rules are a little bit different than your house, but many of them are the same. If you are pulled over by law enforcement, again, ask who they are. Are you ICE? Or are you the police? And why did you stop me? Just like your house, do not open the car door. You can roll down the window so that you can speak to them, but only a little bit. When you are pulled over driving, you do have to show law enforcement your driver's license, your registration, and your insurance. So that's a little bit different than a house. But those are the only things you need to show them. Do not lie to them. Do not give them fake documents. Because again, if you lie or if you give them fake documents, you will get in more trouble with the police or with ICE. If an officer asks to search through your car, you always ask them, do you have a warrant signed by a judge? If they do not, then it's important that you say, I do not consent to your search of my vehicle. I do not consent to your search of my vehicle. Again, it's important to say that out loud. And if you can, say it in English, because that is how you assert your rights and that the law can recognize that you asserted your rights. If an officer continues to ask you questions, you can ask them, am I free to go? Am I free to go? If they say yes, then you are absolutely able to very calmly safely drive away. If they say you are free to go, you do not have to stay. But if they say no, you are not free to go, then you go back and you say your other 4+1 rights. Passengers, if you are in the car, you do not have to speak to law enforcement. The person driving has to give their driver's license, their insurance, but the person who is in the car that is not driving does not have to give them identification. If they want to, they can ask, am I free to go? If they feel safe, they can simply exit the car and walk away. Of course, if you do that, that might also be dangerous. So you get to decide yourself whether it makes more sense to stay in the car altogether or if the agent is specifically looking for the driver and you can leave. But either way, you don't have to speak to them. If they ask you questions, again, you say, I want to remain silent. Am I free to go? I don't consent to a search. I want a lawyer. Next situation, if ICE comes to your workplace. All of the rules, again, are similar for workplaces, but it's a little bit easier often for ICE to get in because to get in, they don't necessarily need a warrant. They just need your boss to let them in. Now, if you have a good boss, hopefully what they do is they stop ICE and say, if you don't have a warrant, I will not let you in. But you don't have control over that. So you don't always know what your boss will do. So it's important to be prepared. If you are at work and an agent approaches you, you ask them, am I free to go? If they say no, you are being detained, then you tell them, I want to remain silent, and you don't say anything. If they say yes, you can go, you can walk away. But no matter what ICE does, stay calm. Do not run, do not interfere, and do not resist if they try to arrest, because that will get you in more trouble. Now, if an officer asks to search you or your property, you can tell them, I do not consent to your search. Don't resist if they try to search you anyway, but it's important again to say it out loud, and if you can, say it in English. Um, Things that count as your property include obviously your person, but also if you have a backpack, if you have a purse, if you have a desk, if you have a work locker, those are all things that you can say, no, I don't consent to your search. Even if they do search it, it's important for you to say it. If it's safe, you can always write down officers' names, badge numbers, what they take, or who they arrest. You also always have the right to record what an officer is doing, as long as you do not interfere with what they are doing. Now, this one is especially important for workplaces. Something that ICE likes to do when they come to workplaces, they like to come in and cause a bunch of commotion, cause a bunch of fear, and then they will tell you, okay, if you're legal, line up over there. If you're illegal, line up over there. And they ask you to move into two lines. Now, because you have the right to remain silent, that also means you don't have to give away information by moving your body. So if they tell you move into a line, you don't have to do that. You can stay where you are and tell officers, I want to remain silent. Now, they may try to grab you and move you to a line, but you do not have to move your body to give that information to them. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what businesses can do to keep their employees safe from ICE. Businesses have a lot of power when it comes to telling ICE what they can and can't do because they have what's called a reasonable expectation of privacy in their business. So employers can assert, hey, this is a private space. You should not be in here without a warrant to ICE. But they need to be aware of what counts as private and public. A public space is something that anybody can get to. For example, if you work in a restaurant, the front of the restaurant is a public space. Anybody can just walk in off the street and they could go to that space. But the kitchen, for example, or maybe the office are probably private spaces. And that means that ICE needs some sort of warrant to get in. But if you have a good relationship with your employer, you can talk with them about how they should put up signs to mark what are private spaces. The more signs that there are saying that a space is private, the better it is so that ICE knows and that they need a warrant to get into that space. Also, it's worth knowing that most spaces that are outside, ICE can access. It doesn't matter necessarily if it's private property. So ICE can access fields, they can access barns, they can access porches often, even if it's not, if it's private property or if it's fenced off or something. They don't need a warrant for these things. So, um, before I move on, Luli, are there any questions that came up in the Q&A that I need to address?
Yes, there's a question that says, I was stopped by ICE together with my son on Sunday night in front of our driveway. In the panic, I didn't record any of the encounter. So, do we need permission to record such encounters?
So the question is, do you need permission to record encounters with ICE? No, you do not need their permission. As long as you are in public in the state of Minnesota, you do not need permission to record somebody. You always can record. Okay.
I also see somebody with their hand up, but I don't see any question that was typed. Looks like somebody has their
Yes.
hand raised.
If you're the person who has your hand raised, unfortunately we can't hear you because this is a webinar. But if you put your question into the question and answer down at the bottom, then they can get the question to me.
I have another question that was
Yes.
posted.
Hmm.
Can ICE enter school parking lots, like gym
Can
parking
I
lots or other parking lots?
So in general, yes, ICE can enter school parking lots. And again, that's because it's the public facing part of the school. Anybody can drive into the parking lot. That means ICE can also drive into the parking lot. However, inside the school is probably different because it's not a public space. Some random person can't just walk off the street and go into the school. They would have to check in with the office first.
Well, another question. If ICE comes to a home and does not have a judicial warrant, can I order them to leave my property? And are they trespassing if they refuse or if they come back without a judicial warrant?
Okay, that's a good question. The question is, can I make ICE leave my property if they don't have a judicial warrant that is signed by a judge? The short answer is you can tell them to leave, absolutely. You probably won't have any luck getting them to saying that they're trespassing, um, because they are still trying to do something that is, part of the law, technically. What it means is they don't have permission to go into your house without your consent. They'll probably still be outside, but they can't go inside without your consent unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge. Okay.
I
Just to
don't,
keep,
s-
oh,
yeah,
one
I
more?
don't see
Yes.
any other questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Lily.
Yes,
Um,
of course.
okay. So, one other thing that we're going to briefly talk about, just so people know about it, is that there is some new law that is especially relevant for all of this, which is called the Lake and Riley Act. So in 2025, early, Trump signed something called the Lake and Riley Act. And what it does, it means that if you are undocumented and you get arrested on suspicion of a theft, of assaulting a law officer, or any sort of crime that results in any sort of death or injury to somebody, that means instead of being able to get out after you've been arrested on bail, you have to stay in jail. So this is different from US citizens and different from people who are documented because they usually have the right to be released on bail. However, because of this law, if you're undocumented, they cannot release you anymore. And again, this is not that you've been convicted of a crime, just that you've been accused by law enforcement of the crime. There isn't a good solution or way to keep yourself safe from this one. It's just something that we need to make sure that we tell people so that they know that they won't be able to get out if they're arrested and they're undocumented for these specific things. Okay. How can you prepare for an encounter with ICE? If somebody you know is detained by ICE, as soon as possible, write down everything you can remember. And that means things like the times, the dates, the badge number if they have a badge. What did they take? Who did they arrest? I know that when something like that happens, it is very traumatic. It hurts a lot in your heart and in your brain. Um, but it's still very important, even when you're feeling emotional, to write that down as quickly as you can, because otherwise it will leave your brain and you'll forget after time. So always write down details as quickly as possible. If you or the person that was arrested said their rights out loud, so if they said those 4+1 rights, I want to remain silent, I want to talk to an attorney, I don't consent to a search, am I free to go, I don't consent to your entry, make sure that you write down that yes, I asserted my rights out loud, or yes, the person asserted my rights out loud. Also, if you are arrested, do not discuss your immigration status with anybody. And that includes don't discuss it with other people who are arrested by ICE. There are ICE officers who speak Spanish. There are ICE officers who speak Somali, who speak Hmong, who speak Karen. You can never assume that just because you speak a different language that they will not understand you. So if somebody else asks, even if there's somebody else arrested, you do not tell them anything about your immigration status. If you are arrested, also ask your attorney about how a criminal conviction might affect your immigration status. This is important because not every attorney in the United States understands immigration law perfectly. Sometimes they say, oh, just sign this because they think that means you will be safe. But sometimes if you sign something and your attorney didn't understand how the immigration system works, it can come back later and affect your status. So always make sure that you ask your attorney, how will this affect my immigration status? And are you familiar with the immigration system? Okay, how to be prepared. If you have a green card, it's important to always carry it with you. In general, for other immigration documents, it's probably best that you carry a copy. If you don't have a green card, carry whatever kind of document that you have. It's best to carry at least one form of documentation on you. But if you have a green card, go with that if you have it. For all of your documents, it's important that you keep a copy of them with somebody that you trust, especially if you have friends or neighbors that you trust well that are US citizens. It can be very useful to give the documents to them because they will be safe from ICE. Um, Also, make sure that your family has a copy of all of your immigration documents. That way, if you're arrested by ICE, your family can help out as well. If you're undocumented, there is still something that you can do to help keep yourself safe a little bit. That is, if you have been in the United States for more than 2 years, you can create a packet of proof that you've been there for 2 years. That might be things like credit card bills or mail or um, anything that has your name on it and shows that you've been in the United States for 2 years. The reason that this is important is that if you've been in the United States for more than 2 years, it is harder to deport you, even if you're undocumented, than if you've been in the United States for less than 2 years. If it's been more than 2 years, it's harder to deport you. Less than 2 years, easier to deport you. So if you've been in the US for more than 2 years and you're undocumented, then try to make a file to show that. Another thing, talk to an immigration attorney before you encounter ICE. If you can, try to memorize your attorney's name and your attorney's number. I say memorize instead of just have in your phone because when you are arrested by ICE, they will take your phone. You will not have access to your phone, so you have to remember the number. Um, if you are concerned about your children or other legal affairs, it's worth considering creating what's called a power of attorney. A power of attorney means that some other adult can do things for you legally. They can sign for you legally, things like that, which is useful if you are arrested by ICE. A DOPA stands for Delegation of Parental Authority. What that does is if you are arrested by ICE, it names somebody else that can act as a guardian for your children while you are gone. That's a very important thing for keeping your children safe so that they're not separated or taken by the government, because then they will have a legal guardian even if you are deported. Um, Lastly, make sure your family has the information here, especially your legal name. If you have an A number, your A number, and your date of birth. Other information that is good for your family to have includes the contact information for your attorney. If your job or your union is sympathetic to you, you can have that number so you can contact them, especially if you're worried about a workplace raid. Um, Make sure you have contact information for anybody that is named in a power of attorney or a DOPA. And then lastly, make sure that you have the number for the local ICE field office. The last one is important because the local ICE field office is how you will find. And for the United States, that is, or excuse me, for the Twin Cities area, that is the Whipple building down at Fort Snelling. Okay. Oh, and I see there's a question. Yes. I think you're in the Spanish interpretations channel, so I can't hear you.
Puedes
Okay.
escribirlo en el text, tal vez, en el chat, por favor, y yo se lo puedo leer.
Luli, can you tell me what it says? I don't want to pull it up, so I have everyone's names in the recording.
Con mucho gusto. So she's asking if you can please repeat the last two sentences because we lost connection. We got a little frozen there.
Oh, okay. Yes. So the last two sentences, um, the things that are useful for your family to have, number 4 and 5, contact information for any person who is named in a power of attorney or a DOPA that you have signed, or the number for your local ICE field office. The ICE field office is especially important because that's how you will find the person that is detained. You will call the local field office and give your name, the A number, the birthday of the person detained, and that's how you find them. And the local ICE field office is the Fort Snelling office. So if you're outside of the metro area, it will be a different office, but it's probably the Fort Snelling office.
We have another question, Paul.
Yes.
The question is, what is the reason why ICE would pull you over? Is there any reason, or is it just random or targeted stops?
Yes. So the question is, why would ICE pull you over? There's many reasons. Unfortunately, more and more, it's just based on how you look. Sometimes they're looking for a specific person if they pull you over, but usually if you are being pulled over, it's not, it's harder to find somebody when they're driving, if that makes sense. So it's more likely that they pull you over just randomly or because they look at the color of your skin and they think, oh, maybe this is somebody that we can arrest. They shouldn't be doing that legally, but unfortunately, that is what they've been doing. And that is what it's like right now. Um, right.
Here's a question that I have for, could we, before we close, could we go back to the slides, the 4+1 slides? I kind of
Yes.
review those and maybe give
Yes.
people the chance at their home, wherever they are, to practice, to listen to the interpretation and practice it, saying it out loud.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. We will practice before we're done. So, okay. Now, more on DOPAs. And again, that is a delegation of parental authority. Um, these slides are going to get sent to you, I believe, by the school district. So if you missed them right now, that's okay. You're going to have these slides and you can scan these QR codes later. But I am going to also leave them up for a few seconds so people can scan them.
And while people are scanning them, a piece of information is that our building leaders, school principals, cultural liaisons, they have copies of this to give out as well.
Okay, that's good news. Perfect. Yeah, okay, perfect. Um, just to repeat, the school has copies of these that they can give you. Okay. Again, this is just about power of attorney. I'm going to leave it here, but this you can also get this when you look at the slides later that are sent to you. Um, I'm guessing does the office also have a copy of powers of attorney, Luli?
I don't believe so, but we can find a way to make those available.
Okay. Probably the most important is the DOPA, but powers of attorney would also be useful.
Yeah. And a little note on the DOPA is that they do need to be notarized, those
Yes.
documents. And we have some people in the district central office, and other places that are notaries that can support the families.
Perfect. Okay. Now, the next slides are more for people who are US citizens. So if you are a family member that is also listening to this presentation, or if you have neighbors that you trust and you want them to help you keep your family, your community safe, these are things that US citizens can do to help against ICE. If you are a US citizen, you have a lot of privileges legally that people who are not citizens don't. That means you can go up to ICE and ask them questions. You can ask them, why are you here? What's your name? Do you have a warrant signed by a judge? You can ask them as many questions as you want, and you can be loud. You can tell your other neighbors that ICE is here. Also, you can film them with your phone if you are anybody can film them with your phone, but it's especially safe if you're a US citizen. As long as you are not stopping them from doing their job, you are always allowed to film ICE. One thing that's very effective that we have found is when communities draw attention to ICE. And the biggest way that you can draw attention to ICE is by being loud. We've seen this with the whistles, with the, just a second. We've seen this with like the whistles. But there are any way that you can make noise will be useful because the louder you are, often ICE sometimes sees that there's so many people in such a crowd, and they decide it's not worth it. We're gonna go. And we have seen this happen. I've been at ICE raids where there were enough people from the community, especially citizens like me, that ICE decided this isn't worth it, and they left, and the person was safe. So our strength is always in numbers. If you, oh, and I forgot, if you're a citizen, anybody really, but especially citizens, there's nothing saying that you can't shout advice to the person who is being, whose house ICE has approached. If you have a megaphone, you can even shout, don't open the door, it's ICE. Or, don't say anything to them. That is perfectly legal. Um, Now, this slide just has some resources about ways to make sure that people know when ICE comes to your community, and especially about these whistles. Again, this is maybe a little more for people who are not vulnerable, so citizens, but if you have any citizen friends, any people who are less vulnerable, recommend to them that they carry a whistle. Really, anybody should carry a whistle, but especially citizens. The next thing is that for people who want to help keep their communities safe from ICE and they are not vulnerable to ICE themselves, you can sign up to learn how to be a community defender so that you can observe ICE and call your neighbors if ICE comes. There's a group called Monarca, which means monarch butterfly in Spanish, um, that does these trainings. Also, very important, they have this number 612 441 2881. This is a hotline number. If ICE comes to your house or if ICE pulls you over, comes to your job, you can call this number and this organization will send people to where you are to be able to be there and see what ICE is doing and bring a crowd and try to make it so that everybody's safe. So if you ever are stopped by ICE or contacted by ICE in any way, it is always good if you can to have somebody call this number because that's the quickest way to get people to respond and help you. I'm going to say it out loud just one more time. The number is 612 441 2881. Okay, now we're going to do a little bit of a quiz. Do you remember those rights that we talked about earlier, the 4+1? We're going to go back to it because it's just so important that you can be able to say these out loud and in English if you can. Again, number one, am I free to go? Actually, if people are able to, can you repeat back? I'll have pauses. So just, I know it will be silly, but when you're sitting at your computer together, I'm going to say it and then say it back to the computer because it will help you. Number one. Oh, so yes, Luli? Oh, sorry, you came up. All right, number one. Am I free to go? Number two. I want to remain silent. Number three. I don't consent to a search. Number four. I want to speak to an attorney. And then the plus one. I don't consent to your entry. Now, I'm only going to give you one homework today, and that is that you should practice this with your family. If this training was in person, what we would do is I would put everybody in pairs, and I would have one person pretend to be an ICE officer, and the other person pretend to be a person in their home. And the ICE officer has to try to get into the house. The person inside has to use their rights, the 4+1, to tell them, no, you can't come in. I know this sounds a little bit silly, but if an ICE officer comes to your house, you're going to be very upset. You're going to be very activated, very scared. You have to be able to practice these things when you feel a little bit scared and upset. Because if you can't do it when you're scared and upset, you won't be able to do it if an ICE officer comes. So it's very important that you practice this with your family. And again, just these phrases are all you need. Am I free to go? I want to remain silent. I don't consent to a search. I want to speak to an attorney. And the plus one, especially for this, I don't consent to your entry. Okay, those are all of the slides that I have. Um, these are just some links to us. Again, we're the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. Most of what we do is educate and protect people's human rights and civil rights. Um, Luli, are there any questions in the chat or in the Q&A?
There are no questions right now, but there was somebody who was very patient with their hand up for a while, and we
Okay.
couldn't respond. So if you're that person and you still have a question, can you please type it in the chat and we will gladly answer it for you.
And make sure that goes to the Q&A, not the chat, the Q&A, which is also down on the bottom of your screen. So, all right.
Yeah, no more questions, I guess.
Questions? Okay. Oh, I see one person that raised their hand. Person that raised your hand, can you type your question into the Q&A down at the bottom?
Yes, it's actually a message. Somebody said, thank you for doing this.
Of course. It's important to keep all of our neighbors safe, and it's everybody's job to help with that. So, of course. Okay, if there are no more questions, again, thank you so much for coming to this training. There will be a recording of the training. I will also send the slides to the school, who I think will send them to you as well. And if you have any questions, you can always contact Luli or the school, and they will know how to get in touch with me. Or you can contact me. Again, my name is Paul Sullivan, and I'm at the ACLU of Minnesota. You can go to our website here and request assistance or contact, and then they will find a way to get in touch with me.
Three more messages. One is, well, more than three. Awesome presentation. Gracias a todos. Another one is, you said ICE does not have legal authority to perform a traffic stop, right?
Or a traffic infraction. So they can stop you while you're driving, but they're not gonna like pull you over because you ran a red light, for example. Um, Does that make sense? They'll only stop you for immigration purposes. They're not going to stop you for breaking a traffic law.
Mm. Another question is, if you are a U.S. citizen and do not have your passport with you, but you tell them you're a citizen, are they allowed to arrest you?
That's a very difficult question. The short answer is that no, they should not have the power to arrest you unless you're interfering. Um, what often happens is that if they suspect that you're not a citizen, they'll probably arrest you and just try to get the documents later. So even if you are a US citizen, it's important often to carry something proving that you're a US citizen right now. It shouldn't be that way. For most of our history as a country, it hasn't been that way. But right now, it's probably best to have some form of identification, um, even if you're a US citizen, um, and especially if you have an immigrant background.
Another question is, how do we know it is really ICE and not criminals?
That is a very good question. How do you know it's ICE and not criminals? The short answer is that we don't necessarily know. There have been cases where ICE has, or where people have pretended to be ICE to rob houses, to do things to people. Um, and because they don't show their faces or have badge numbers, there's not really a good way to know if they're actually ICE or if they're just pretending to be ICE. So the short answer is you have to kind of assume that they're ICE. Um, but that's yeah. It's not a very good answer, I know, but we're also in a very strange time legally. We haven't seen this before. So, and that's also why it's important to always have a group of people if you see ICE, because even if it's people who are pretending to be ICE, if they're just thieves or something, it's going to be harder for them to do something to you if there's a big crowd of people. So, always find that crowd. Use the whistle.
Somebody asks, if they stop you, can you call 911?
If they stop you, can you call 911? You can call 911. The results can be mixed. I know that Roseville specifically, the police have policies, is my understanding, that they're not allowed to ask about immigration status, um, and they're not supposed to cooperate with ICE. So in Roseville, you could call 911, but we've also seen when people call 911, sometimes the police are just like, yeah, it's ICE. I'm not going to do anything. Good luck. Um, so I think I would first call that number that I had a few slides ago, the the 612-441-2881 number. You can call 911, but the results may be mixed.
Here's another question. How does ICE get away with using fake warrants?
How does ICE get away with using fake warrants? The short answer is that they're not technically fake. They just don't do what other warrants do. So an administrative warrant is it's a real document, but they don't need the same amount of evidence or proof to get one, which means it's much, much, much less powerful. So it is a real document, but it doesn't allow them to enter your house or anything like that. So that's how it is. It's not technically fake, but it also doesn't have the same power. And they kind of depend on people not knowing the difference because they'll assume, oh, it's a warrant. They can do whatever they want. No, if it's not signed by a judge, it's not as powerful.
Another question is, are they allowed to take pictures of your passport?
Is ICE allowed to take pictures of your passport? They are allowed to take pictures of your passport. Um, there's not really anything you could do to stop them, unfortunately. That's my understanding. Um, To be fair, and again, I should have said this at the start, I do a lot of education around this, but I can't give specific legal advice to an individual situation. But in general, my understanding is that they could take a picture of your passport if they wanted to.
Here's a message for one of our attendees. If you call the Monarca hotline, so the number that Paul has displayed several times with a beautiful butterfly, there's a group of Roseville community members ready to show up with whistles and be loud to support. So you call the hotline. That's the encouragement.
Yes. I have talked with
Thank you.
many, many neighbors who are very willing to come and support.
And then there's another one that says, as a question, will a picture of my passport on my iPhone be enough?
Will a picture on your iPhone be enough? Some it's often enough. It really depends on how nasty the officer wants to be. So for example, there was a US citizen arrested last week in the Twin Cities who was a US citizen of Somali descent. Um, and I believe he just had to show, they didn't let him show his phone and his passport on his phone until he was already arrested. But when he did, they let him go. So it's going to depend on the individual officer. But the short answer is it can be enough. If you want to be extra safe, carry your passport. Um, Again, I'm not an attorney and I can't give that as firm legal advice, but from the patterns that we have seen.
There's another question. Does the district have a what if ICE comes guide? Yes, we have a guidance document called What to Do if ICE comes to our schools that has been shared with our district and school leadership since last year, a year ago. It has been updated accordingly.
Yeah.
And
Yes, there
another,
is a guide.
yeah. Another question is, why does ICE hide their faces?
Why does ICE hide their faces? The short answer is because they don't want to be recognized, because they know that if people recognized them, that there would have a lot of social consequences for doing things that violate so many people's rights. Um, so that's the short answer is because they don't want to be accountable for the things that they do.
Another question is, if they have not arrested you, but they want to take a picture of you and put it in their biometric system, do you have the right to refuse that?
Yes, you do have the right to refuse them taking your picture for a biometric. No matter what your status is, you don't have to consent to that unless you've been arrested. If you're just out walking around on the street, you absolutely can tell them, no, I do not consent to you taking a picture of me for biometrics. Um, because, yeah,
I think another question is, I think it's our last, how about a paper copy of the passport? So I'm assuming, should I have it on my iPhone or does a actual paper copy count as well?
does a paper copy count? Yeah, a paper copy is just as good as an or a picture on your phone. Neither of them will be as strong as the actual passport. Um, but one advantage of the paper copy is that even if your phone battery dies, you still have a copy. Because of course, if your phone dies and that's your only form of proof that you have a passport, that's an issue. Um, so I would say paper maybe a little bit better than phone. The actual passport is of course the best.
Another question, if ICE arrests you, would you have a criminal record then?
If ICE arrests you, would you have a criminal record? That's a little challenging to answer as somebody who is not myself a lawyer. My understanding, that's not legal advice, is that if you were arrested by ICE, it's probably for something that's immigration related. Most immigration infractions are not crimes. Most immigration infractions are civil offenses. So think kind of like a parking ticket. Um, it's a little more serious than that, of course, but it's not a criminal offense usually. Um, of course, ICE might arrest you for all sorts of different things. So it really depends on what they choose to arrest you for. But if it's for something that is related to immigration specifically, that's probably not a criminal offense. No, in general.
I think that was the last question, Paul.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I think that is it.
Thank you. Muchas
I'm going to
gracias.
stop. Yep,
Vas a
I'm going to
hacer.
stop the